Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meadsyre69 and welcome back to the channel. Today we have the IS-4 versus the IS-7. We've done a couple of these videos now and they seem to go down pretty well. So the IS-4 versus the IS-7, what is the difference? There's quite a lot of difference, to be honest. DPM goes in the IS-4's favour at, not even 100 more. It's very close together in terms of stats. The penetration goes in the IS-7's favour, but very close. 258 versus 260. The IS-7 actually has a 460 alpha. It does have that 130mm gun, whilst the IS-4 has a 420 with the 122mm gun. Because of that, the reload is slightly better on the IS-4. Just over a second there, and the shell velocity is a little bit better on the IS-4 as well. Aim time is exactly the same, and the dispersion is slightly better on the IS-4. They both share 6 degrees of gun depression, and the IS-5 is a little bit quicker at 50 kilometers compared to 43. Now, where these tanks do stand out, stat-wise, the IS-7 looks so much better. On paper, it looks much better than the IS-4. Now, the turret on the IS-4 is 250 on the front compared to 240 on the IS-7. 200 on the sides. Beg your pardon, sorry about that noise. 200 on the side against 185 on the IS-7, and the whole the rear of the turret is 170 compared to 94 on the IS-7. So the rear of the turret of the IS-4 is much better. But the rest of it, all the hull, they are very, very similar on paper. So what is the big difference? And why don't I like the IS-7 compared to the IS-4? And there's pretty much just one thing, and that is the pike nose. It is much, much harder to play the IS-7 compared to the IS-4 because you can go hold down, but you can't really side scrape. You have to side scrape properly and hide the pike nose on this thing. And again, the difference is in the IS-4, if you look, you can't look directly at a tank. You have to go in at an angle. Whereas the IS-7, you're best off looking directly at a tank because that means your pike nose, the front top plate becomes very, very strong, but then your bottom plate does become weak. So if they can, again, the IS-7 has probably got one of the weakest ammo racks in tier 10. It's probably the most ammo rack tank, maybe even in the game. It is really, really weak. And if you come out sideways, you can get shot from the side and be ammo racked. Or if you come out at an angle and a Death Star shoots your pike nose, then you can also get ammo racked by that as well. So the IS-7 is definitely the most ammo rack tank in tier 10, and like I said, in even possibly the game. So it's very hard. It's a lot harder to play the IS-7 than the IS-4, which is why I always say with the IS-4, if anyone is asking what tier 10 do I get first for my first tier 10, I would always recommend the IS-4 because you can make more mistakes and you can get away with it. Whereas if you try and side scrape in this thing, if you try and come out at an angle, then your ammo rack can just be exploded. Where the IS-4, it's got that troll armor, it hasn't got that pike nose, so you can side scrape really, really well. And you could do a lot of things with the IS-4. You can side scrape, you can hold down, you can face hug. You could do a lot of things that you can't do in the IS-7. So it doesn't mean that the IS-7 is a bad tank. Personally, I'm not a lover of it, only because I just love the IS-4 so much. I'm not a lover of the tank, but it's not a bad tank, and it doesn't mean you can't perform in this tank. You can perform, and we're going to watch a couple of games here. One in the IS-7, one in the IS-4. Both games are pretty even, and they both do really, really well. So the IS-7 here, as I've said, you have to try and go hold down. You have to try and go hold down in this thing. And if anything, if you need to side scrape, probably reverse side scraping is the best because you are hiding that pike nose. Don't come out at an angle, because if you come out at an angle, then the top plate, the front plate is just really, really weak. Always try and directly face a tank. And if you are in that hold down position, again, don't hold down at an angle like this kind of thing. directly look at that tank. As long as your bottom plate is hidden and you're directly looking at a tank, you will bounce those shots. So this game now his platoon mate has just got wrecked, and he has to be careful now because they are losing on tanks, but he's still going to play it really, really well. I'm not sure of the name of the person just yet until he gets a kill, but he's still full hit points. It's 3 against 6. There's a lot of work to do, but there are 2 tanks around here that are very, very low hit points, and he needs to rush these guys to at least clear one of them. I would probably go for the back chat, Black Goku, and he did go for the black bat chat, only because the T92E1, I mean, it is a missile tank and it probably is better, but it's less DPM, and the bat chat is probably the better tank to go for, to be honest. So now he's face hugging this VK. He's face hugging the VK. He needs to, probably not the best angle. Because the right side of his hull would have been weak for the VK to get the shots off, but he manages to clear him. But it is now a 1 versus 3, so there's a lot of work to do, but there is still, I mean, there's 2 tanks on a 1 shot. He has that 460 alpha, so he should be able to clear 2 tanks nice and easy. But the only tank he's got a target on at the moment is that mouse. He really needs to ignore the mouse, which I love what he is going to do, because he's going to do exactly that. He's going to go for the 1 shots, and he's willing to take some shots from that mouse to clear these guys. And the Jaegeru is definitely a good tank to clear because he can easily get ammo racked from him. And now you can see he's trying to get close to the IS-7, and he does manage to take him out for his 6th kill. 6,100 damage, and now just the mouse to go, and he's going to try and side hug. And this is the best things about Russian tanks: side hug, face hug. You need to do all that to do well. You have to do that, and these tanks, this and the IS-4, become really, really difficult tanks to deal with when you're in these kind of positions, because you're just trying to aim at the weak spots, and there's not a lot of weak spots to aim for, especially when you have a tank that's just rocking backwards and forwards, side to side all the time. So really good game from Black Goku there. Really, really good game. Bounced only 1,000 damage, but he does get 7,391 damage and all 7 kills. So well played there. Next up, we are going to watch Kevin from the Strat clan, and he's driving the IS-4, and this is a absolute perfect map for an IS-4. And don't forget, it does have that 6 degrees of gun depression. Personally, I think the IS-4 is a little bit overpowered. Wargaming have changed it. It used to have a strong front plate, like a really strong front plate, but weak sides. But Wargaming changed that and made the front plate a bit less, and they gave it more side armor, so it can side scrape more. It could be more of a side scraping heavy than a front line heavy. On these kind of maps, when you are using that 6 degrees of gun depression, I mean, if you add 5 degrees of gun depression, then I don't think it can do these kind of shots. But I definitely think this tank needs to be nerfed. Maybe even give it that 5 degrees of gun depression, because when you're on a map like mine's here, he can just hold this hill, and there's not a lot the enemy can do. Absolutely not a lot at all, because there's not a lot of weak points on the turret of the IS-4, and the only weak point frontally is that bottom plate. And when you're on a hill like this using that 6 degrees of gun depression, you just can't see that bottom plate at all. Now the IS-4 on the enemy team, he has different thoughts. He wants to go up the hill, and I mean, Kevin's just going to tear him apart without being in any danger whatsoever. He's managed to block a shot, only 310. He is going to block a bit more, and he's now on 3k damage. And as I've said, these kind of positions in this kind of tank, these are a nightmare. They are an absolute, I mean, just look at all this block damage coming in. Of course, he is going to get shot. Once in a while you are going to get shot, but I mean, he's bounced 1100 damage. He's going to bounce a little bit more there, again a bit more block damage, and even more there, 780. So 1900 block damage. Now he's managed to bag himself 4500 damage, and he's got himself 1 kill. So this kind of position you can't do too well in an IS-7, because again, unless you're directly facing the enemy, and when the enemy are in these kind of positions, I mean, the enemy on this team was, I mean, they were all over the place. They were all over the place. So if you got into that position in the IS-7, then you would be angled to some of the tanks, which they would be able to shoot your pike nose pretty easily. And again, if you're angling, people, you see it all the time in IS-7s, people try and side scrape, and you're like, dude, don't do that. Like, don't do that. You're making your armor a lot weaker for me to be able to penetrate. Whereas normally I'd have to switch to Pramo to hit your upper plate. As soon as you start turning at an angle, I can now shoot you with normal ammunition nice and easy. So thank you very much. So just try and not angle. Try and not angle in an IS-7, and that's why these two tanks are actually so different, because they are played completely different. There's some things you can do in an IS-7 that you can't do in an IS-4, and there's some things you can do in an IS-4 that you can't do in an IS-7. They are, for me, they're completely different tanks. But if the IS-7 is much more popular than the IS-4, believe it or not. It is the most played tier 10, in fact. And it was back in the day, and it seems like it still is, it was the tank to get. It was the tank to get first, because the armor is troll, and it is. The armor is troll. The side armor of all the IS tanks, IS-8, IS-3s, all of them are very troll, and they're very annoying, because you think you can pen them, but because of the spaced armor, you just bounce, and it's so annoying when it happens to you. But when you're in the tank and people are bouncing your rear, your side, it is pretty fun. But out of the two, definitely the IS-4 is much better, and I would definitely recommend going for that line over the IS-7. So I hope you enjoyed it, guys. I'm meadsy69, and I will catch you all soon. Bye bye. With